Hey Reflow customers, today we'll be replacing the seals and bearings in your Dart 750 pump. Here's some of the tools you'll need. In this next picture, you'll see a bearing puller, which can be rented from most auto parts stores. Begin by removing the 6 P-bolts from the wet end with a 3/8 inch wrench, or a socket with an extension. Remove the volute and set it aside. Now we'll remove the impeller. Start by placing a flathead screwdriver in the center screw of the rear motor. Steadily screw and hand spin the impeller off counterclockwise. This is the seal you'll be replacing. Now remove the bracket. Loosen the 4 M-bolt screws holding the bracket to the motor, but do not fully unscrew the screws. Rotate the bracket counterclockwise so the screws release from the keyholes. This is the other seal you'll be replacing. Now remove the foot and the 2 screws holding the fan cover on. This will require a Phillips head screwdriver. After removing the fan cover, use a 5/64 Allen wrench to loosen the fan screw and remove the fan. Now remove the 2 through bolts with a 9/32 socket. Remove the end bell with a flathead screwdriver by slowly rotating it and prying it. Make sure that you keep the wavy spring washer with the end bell. Now gently tap the motor shaft out of the motor through the front. The shaft should slide out fairly easily. Next, we'll be using a bearing puller, which can be rented from most auto parts stores, to pull out the front end bell with the bearing attached to it. Now this end bell has a C-clip inside of it that will need to be removed as well. However, it doesn't need to be put back in when you're reinstalling the pump. This is the C-clip. You'll have to use a C-clip removal tool and a flathead screwdriver to remove the C-clip. Now, remove the bearing from the front end bell. Sometimes you might be able to get lucky enough to tap it out. Sometimes you might have to work a little bit harder on getting them out. After removing the bearings, clean each end of the shaft. Slide the new bearing over one end of the motor shaft and then use your punch tool that only makes contact with the inside of the bearing. You do not want it to make contact with the plastic of the bearing, just the inside that touches the shaft. Same thing on the other side. We'll start by replacing the seals in the bracket. First, remove the gasket. To remove the old seals from the center of the bracket, start by positioning the bracket with the keyholes facing up on a roll of tape underneath for support and clearance to pop out the old seal. Place the tip of a flathead screwdriver on the back part of the old seal and gently tap until it pops out. Now clean the bracket hole with some paper towels. Once you have your new seal, apply a thin layer of silicone around the center of the bracket. I usually apply a little bit more than a pea-sized amount of silicone on my pointer finger, and then I'll slowly rotate the bracket while kind of painting the inside with the silicone on the finger. After applying silicone to the entire hole, place the seal inside the bracket and then use a 27mm socket to press the seal in evenly. The socket must make contact with the outer metal lip of the seal and not make contact with the seal itself. Now I'm doing this with a hammer, but if you do have a press, you can also do it with that. Just lightly tap the socket until the seal is fully seated in the bracket. Make sure the seal is fully pressed into the bracket, then clean up excess silicone smudges and fingerprints. The glue will take about 30 to 45 minutes to dry. Once you've wiped off all the excess adhesive, install the gasket. Pry out the ceramic portion of the old seal from the center of the impeller with a flathead screwdriver. Place the flat tip between the rubber seal and the piece and impeller. Do not crack the plastic impeller. Clean all excess silicone. Apply a small amount of silicone around the inner edge of the impeller hole. Press the new ceramic seal firmly in place. You can use something like a 9/16 socket to do this. Make sure all sides are pushed down evenly, and then you want to clean off the fingerprints or excess silicone on the ceramic face. Any amount of glue that is used that gets on the seal and make sure it's pressed in evenly. Then, using a paper towel, clean off any excess silicone around the edges. Anything that gets on the seal can cause it to leak. And same with the bracket, this glue will take about 30 to 45 minutes to dry before you can use it. And that completes the seal replacement on the bracket and impeller. Start by placing the motor shaft inside the front end bell. It should be fairly easy to slide in. Next, align the motor shaft with the motor casing and slide the motor shaft in. Again, this should be fairly easy. Now, install the 2 through bolts. Now, apply the rear end bell and the wavy spring washer. You'll want to install the end bell with the peg facing upwards that you will screw the motor foot into. There's 3 screw holes. You want to make sure that one is facing straight up. Make sure you don't tighten the through bolts too tight. And make sure that both end bells are securely fastened to the motor casing and that there's no space in between. Next, take the fan and apply it to the rear of the motor shaft. When there's a flat part on the motor shaft, and you want to align the set screw with that, and then tighten it with the Allen wrench. Also, make sure all the fan blades are in the correct position and that they won't make contact with the fan cover or the motor casing. Now, reinstall the fan cover and align it with the holes. First, screw in the foot. Then, the 2 screws holding the fan cover on. Now, align the 4 screws with the keyholes on the back of the bracket. Make sure the foot of the bracket is in the correct spot and not facing the other direction. You should be able to just turn it to where it locks in place. Next, tighten the 4 screws. Do not over tighten or the bracket could crack. Now reinstall the impeller the same way you removed it. With a flathead screwdriver at one end, holding the motor shaft steady, spin the impeller on clockwise until both seals meet. There should be some amount of pressure between both seals, so they seal correctly. Now we'll install our volute. Start by placing the volute over the bracket and impeller, and you can leave the screws in to make it a little bit easier to align. Then take the 6 P-bolts and fasten them back onto the bracket. There is a bolt at the top of the pump that you might not be able to reach with your socket extension, and you can use a 3/8 inch wrench for this. Don't over tighten the bolts because it can cause the plastic to crack on the wet end. Use your finger or a screwdriver at the back to make sure that the motor spins freely and that nothing is making contact.